On this week's episode of the LA Business Podcast, our guest this week started as the director of operations and quickly in 2 years became the chief executive officer. She's grown the company from $8 million to $60 million in revenue, and still 15 years later, she is the CEO of her company. Let's jump right into this week's episode of the LA Business Podcast. Welcome to the LA Business Podcast, your destination to hear stories of how businesses grow and scale. I'm Robert Brill, CEO of Brill Media and the host of this podcast. Now, let's jump right into this week's interview. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the LA Business Podcast. Today our guest is Kerry Siggins, CEO of StoneAge, StoneAge Tools, host of the podcast Reflect Forward. StoneAge is an engineering and manufacturing company with industrial cleaning equipment, and the company is also employee owned. That's interesting. So there's a lot going on there. Thanks for being on the show, Kerry. You have a great story. You started with StoneAge Tools in 2007. In 2009, you became the CEO. Tell us about that 2 years, and tell us a little bit about your background. But I'm really interested in that 2 year period where you ascended to CEO.
Sure. So I came to StoneAge in a unique way. I was leaving a unfulfilling and trouble-fueled life in Austin, Texas in 2006, and I wanted to come back to my roots. I'm born and raised in Colorado. So I quit my job, packed in Austin, packed up all my belongings, and moved back in with my mother, which was not on my plan, but I was 28 and starting over again. And when I got to Durango, I do what you do in a small town. I looked for a job in the newspaper, and StoneAge was hiring for a general manager. And even though I was underqualified for the position, I have an engineering degree and I had been working in operations management, I had never run a company before. But I decided to go ahead and apply. And if I didn't get the job, hopefully be able to get my foot in the door for another position. And the two founders saw something in me, drive, potential, a good attitude, positivity, and a good cultural fit. So they decided to take a risk and hire me. So I came on as actually the director of operations. They decided that, well, really, they gave me a lesser title because they didn't want to pay me as much as they wanted to for the general manager, which I don't blame them. I was young. And I really focused on fixing some of the manufacturing and engineering issues that they had within the company. They were growing quickly and just were not poised to scale. And having worked in a big manufacturing company prior to coming to back to Durango and coming to StoneAge, Eaton Corporation, I had seen a lot of these issues arise. And so I had ideas on how to solve them. So boy, we just dug in and started fixing issues left and right, restructured the company so they could scale, started putting a deeper focus on building out distributor relationships internationally to scale the company. And about a year after I was hired, one of the founders, John Wogelmott, said to me, "Well, I know you were on a 5-year plan, but you're doing a great job, and so I bought a boat and I'm going to take off half the year and go to Florida. So I'm going to promote you to general manager now. You're really going to take the next step." And so he said, "Okay, thank you. I appreciate that." And I took that on and then started to focus on more international growth and developing more complex products. And then about a year and a half after that, he said, "We want to promote you to CEO. We want you to come onto the board of directors and really help us scale the company." And I think that came from several things, our international expansion and the success that we had with that, really fixing some of the operational issues that we were having to become more efficient and more profitable, and then being a really great cultural fit. I fit within the organization, and I think he could see that the team was that we were really gelling and doing great things. And so he wanted to fully hand the reins over to me and take over running the company. So that was what those first couple of years looked like. It was a wild ride.
So, first time, was that the first time you were a CEO?
Yeah, first time.
Okay, and so tell us about the struggles, any ups and downs. What did you learn over the first couple of years being a CEO?
Well, I think the first thing that I learned is that I probably wasn't really a CEO. And
Okay,
someone actually told me that, and I was personally offended.
sure.
Looking back on it now, there's just there was just so many things that I didn't know. I was 30 years old and just didn't have the experience. So what I did though, that looking back was I think a really good move is I surrounded myself with really smart people both within the company and on my board of directors. I look at my board of directors as a competitive advantage, and they really helped me figure out how to be a CEO. And there's no other way to learn how to be a CEO but to just do it. And I made a ton of mistakes, being too aggressive with approach to our strategy, not always having a solid plan into place, making some of these decisions, making hiring decisions, right? Hiring and really wanting it to work out, and being afraid to pull the trigger to say no, not going to work out. I need to let this person go. So I would say that my career is more defined on the mistakes that I made, and what I learned from them than the successes that I had. It was some painful lessons there. 2008, 2009, coming out of the financial crisis, and then scaling and growing the company. Boy, there's a lot of things that you just don't know, and you have to figure out by doing.
Okay, so that's really interesting. We're an ad buying firm, and I bill myself as the CEO, and I am the CEO because there's no one else fully in charge of the business as I am. What
Right.
I found is that the job changes every 6 to 9 months.
Yeah.
I've never asked this to someone, and my question to you is, does do you find or did you find that your job changes dramatically in those periods, or do you feel like it's the same type of job year in and year out?
No, I think I agree with
Okay.
you. Every 6 to 9 months, it was changing. Absolutely. You get thrown curveballs,
Mhm.
and if you're not growing, you're dying, whether
Mhm.
that's personally or whether that is growing your company. And when you're growing, things change. So in my early days, it was a small company, 30 employees, 8 million in revenue. I was very much an operational leader, and my fingers were in everything. And then it got to the point as we were growing quickly, I realized like, I cannot be in the details like this. I have to still care about the details because that's where execution happens, but I'm not thinking about the future if I'm constantly dealing with the fires that we're putting out. And I've just learned that over and over and over again as I've developed as a CEO. The work that I do is very different every single year as the company really scales. And I think that I think was makes something that's I think it's very unique, right? To be able to be in one position and have that job change so dramatically. I've been doing this for 15 years now, and there's not one single year that I would say my job was exactly the same.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really interesting, and I think that's one of the things I love about the position that I've created for myself, right? It's a new and unique position. You are not trained to be a CEO. Like, you just jumped right into the fire, you demonstrated that you knew how to make things happen in your business. So, how did you handle the uncertainties of now 2 economic downturns? How What did you learn out of those experiences?
Yeah. So, yes, I think, it's interesting, right? I don't really know if you're ever to be really trained to be a CEO. I know certainly people are groomed that way, but there is nothing like having that full responsibility on
Mhm.
your shoulders that comes with being at that level of executive position. So the pressure is tremendous, especially when you take your job really seriously, and you know that all of your employees livelihood is they're relying on you to make good decisions.
Yeah.
And so, I would say that whole it's always just been this learning process, right? Like how I've learned how to be successful in this role is by doing and making mistakes, analyzing those mistakes, and really stretching myself to, I don't know, be an ambidextrous leader. I think that's what makes a great CEO is being ambidextrous. You have to be able to hold competing ideas, competing directions, competing strategies in your mind at the same time to figure out how do I exploit my current business? How do I take advantage of these new opportunities? How do I peer into the future and then make that make sense for where we're at now so we can get there over the next 5 to 10 years? And I think that is just trial and error learning, but I do think it takes some certain competencies to be able to do it well.
So yeah, I mean, it takes, yeah, it takes nerves of steel in some way.
Yeah.
Um, so you've grown the company from $8 million to $60 million in revenue. What are some of the viewpoints or strategies that you've developed over the years that allowed for that growth to happen?
Yeah. So I would say focusing on the core through both well, we've gone through three downturns: 08, 09, and then the 2014 oil price crash affected us, and then of course
Mm,
COVID. And staying really focused on your core and what's going to get you out of it, I think that's an incredibly important thing. So for us, we never skimp on product development because we're a product leadership company, and we never skimp on marketing, right? How do we really make sure that we tell our story in a compelling way that makes our customers the hero? And so I think staying really focused on those two things, as we've developed the company to be more efficient and scalable, we are true to our core, and that is great products and great service. And you tell that story in a compelling way that makes people say, I want to work with StoneAge. Why would I choose anybody else but StoneAge? And I think that having laser like focus is really the key to success in many ways.
did you innately know that marketing has to stay on and grow?
I innately knew that. Yeah, no one ever
Mm,
taught me that. When I was working for Eaton before I came
mhm,
to StoneAge, I was very much in an operational role, and marketing was not part of my job. But I am a natural marketer at
yeah,
heart, and I could see the importance of it. I really did a lot of self education around it. Had a great board member who was an expert in marketing, who really helped me understand the power of crafting a message like that.
mhm.
But yes, I would say, that how you tell your story, how you position your brand, how you make your customers feel, that is equally as important as the product or service that you sell.
And so who do you sell to?
So we sell to industrial cleaning contractors who have contracts with industrial facilities, refineries, petrochem plants, chemical plants, food processing, anywhere you'd use ultra high pressure water to clean, and anywhere where it's really, really dirty. And so these contractors go in and perform cleaning on a day-to-day basis, and then also when a plant shuts down to do bigger maintenance projects. And then we do sell to those industrial facilities too, but those are typically more custom solutions where they have a specific application that they need, like a clean in place system built. But our primary customers are industrial cleaning contractors.
And so, I mean, so it's business to business advertising or
Mhm.
marketing, I should say. I mean, that seems very specific, very niche. Like, how do you tell your story when the vast majority of people who might see, like, a social media post, for example, aren't your audience?
So we curate our audience very carefully,
Yeah.
and social is just one way that we do it. I mean, we certainly have an email list, and the personal interaction that we have, our website. We're actually doing a big digital customer experience platform rollout right now.
Mhm,
Every single touch point, we really consider the opportunity to tell that story. And
mhm,
we are very clear on our brand voice. We know that we are here to educate, we're here to be helpful, we're here to learn, right? We never want to be the expert. We always want to be learners, and we want to be approachable and fun while we do that. And we are an employee owned company, as you stated earlier. And so we have this really unique way of showing up that says, hey, I'm here to help you. I'm an owner in this company. Your success is important to my success. And it really creates the way that we've created this message. It really creates this, I think, interesting bond and loyalty with our customers, because they know that we're not just collecting paychecks, that we really, really care about solving their problems because we own this company. And I think that is woven through all of our marketing, and it really builds that trust in that relationship, which is really important.
Okay, so tell us about an employee-owned company. Like, I think I understand the basic principle here, but like, what is it? How does it work? That's
Sure.
pretty interesting here.
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in employee ownership. I've drank the Kool-Aid. I actually sit on Governor Polis's, who's the governor of Colorado,
Mhm,
his commission for employee ownership. So I do a lot with this.
mhm,
So employee ownership it can look lots of different ways. We are what's called an ESOP, employee stock ownership plan, which is a ownership structure that's managed by ERISA and the Department of Labor. It's transferred ownership transferred through a retirement benefit. There's lots of other ways you can do it, but that's our choice because we want broad ownership. uh, and really, it's a way to transfer ownership, transfer wealth from founders to employees. And our founders have a legacy that they want to leave behind. And that really is employee ownership, especially in Durango, Colorado. Durango is an amazing place to live, but there's not a lot of great jobs here. And so
mhm.
they want this legacy of creating this really great company owned by employees. Now, employee ownership, I get asked this all the time. Employee ownership does not mean that it's a democracy, right? That everybody gets to vote on the decisions and everybody has an equal say in the direction of the company. No, I'm responsible for running and growing the company. The board is responsible for managing the ESOP trust. But I would say I have a very transparent and consultative style. I want everybody bought in to the direction that we're going, and I want to hear their ideas. Collectively, we make far better decisions than my executive management does on their own or me on my own. And so it's really about this holistic approach of everybody has an ownership mindset, everybody gets to share in the success of the company, and we're here to grow value for our customers and grow value for our employee shareholders.
So how like, so if when a person starts, there might be some period where when they become eligible
Yep.
for this, let's say that period's enacted whenever, what is it, 6 months, a year, whatever the period is.
Yep.
So I receive stock or in my retirement, like what do I actually get if
Sure.
if I'm part of the company?
Yeah, so for an ESOP, is exactly how it works. So you've got to be there for a certain amount of time. Every ESOP is different. We say you've
Mhm,
got to be there for half of a year, work 1,000 hours, and then you can come into the plan. And then there's a vesting schedule, so you can vest over 5 years because we want the ESOP is certainly meant for longevity, and that's how you gain wealth. Is when you own a company for a long time and you really grow it.
right.
Then every year, the company gets a valuation from an outside valuation firm, and then that's what the
Really?
board sets. Yep, yeah. For an ESOP, it has to be an outside valuator, which has pros and cons, right?
Right.
Uh, Having a much more perfect. We were employee owned before this, but it was a invest money in the company, skin in the game type plan for our employees, and we
Mhm,
had a homegrown um, valuation equation,
mhm.
which was not forward looking like what you do when you're looking at future cash flow and EBITDA growth
Yeah.
for the current valuation. So it was undervalued at the time. So now we have this outside valuation firm who does a much better job than what we did previously, but you also give control up because someone is valuing your company every year. We get the valuation back, the board sets the stock price, and then every year shares are released into employees' accounts. And so they get new shares, plus they get the stock appreciation. StoneAge is a
Mhm,
very profitable and growing company. So our ESOP is growing, at 25, 30, 35, 40% a year. So
mm.
it's generating significant wealth for our employee owners. And the longer you stay with the company, the bigger that gets.
And so, like, does the retirement fund, when a person turns 59 and a half, or I think that's the age, like, what happens? You can pull money out of that or sell the shares, or how does that work?
Yeah. So we always tell people like this is even though it's managed in a retirement benefit, it's ownership. You own the company. When you leave, we will buy you out, and you can take a,
Ah,
a penalty, and take the cash and pay the 10% penalty that you would pay, or you can roll it penalty free into your own personal IRA, and continue to let it grow until you retire, where then you take no penalty. If you stay with the company until retirement age, at 59, there's mandatory, they call it mandatory diversification. And so we'll start to take some of that money each year and roll it into safer, even though,
Mhm.
StoneAge is the safest place you could put your money,
100%.
into safer mutual funds. And then at their retirement age, then they can take it completely penalty free if they would like, and start using it for retirement. So the money's theirs. It just depends on when you leave the company and what you want that to look like for your own personal choice on how you take that money.
That's fascinating.
It's so fascinating. And the other really interesting thing is that we're a sub S corporation, which means that the company pays no corporate income tax. All the earnings, taxable earnings, flow to the shareholders. Well, when you're a sub S and the ESOP trust owns all of the shares in the company, the trust does not pay taxes. So you are just generating cash, which then of course generates more wealth. And then when the employees leave, right, they pay it as they draw on it as ordinary income. And so this
Whoa.
whole situation is unbelievable, right? We have so much power because of the cash that we can generate. We can do really amazing things to solve problems for our customers and to create wealth for our company, our employees, because we have no leakage until an employee leaves the company and we pay them out. So it is a brilliant model. It's a model that founders should absolutely consider. And I don't think enough of them do. It's good for them, and it's really good for the company, and it's really good for their employees, who, let's face it, are building the value in the company.
You had me at we don't pay corporate taxes.
I know, right?
Jeez, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's mind blown. Let's jump to a different topic. You have a podcast called Reflect Forward. When did you start that, and why did you start the podcast?
Sure. So I actually have two podcasts. My first one's called Industrial Theory. So we love giving a platform for our customers to share their story. And so I decided many years ago to start a podcast for our industry. And it's called Industrial Theory. And I interview people from all over the world who are in industrial cleaning. So very, very niche. Well, it was so popular, I started getting people requesting to come on to the show, but it didn't make sense, right? It was not in the niche of industrial cleaning. And I'm a big believer in sharing ideas on leadership and writing a book, and I have a pretty decent social media following around leadership, and so someone just says, you just need to start a leadership podcast too, and then you can have the best of both worlds. You can have your industrial cleaning show, and then you can have one on leadership. And so that's where Reflect Forward was born. And I really wanted to be like this, right? The conversation on leadership,
Mhm.
and yeah. So now I interview all kinds of amazing people. And I do an interesting model. Every other week I do an interview, and then I do an advice from a CEO. So people who
Mhm.
are looking to get to the C-suite, or who are first-time CEOs or entrepreneurs who are like, oh my God, I started this company, but I have no idea how to lead it. I really want to be able to transfer all of the things that I learned trying to figure out how to be a CEO to them. So that's what Reflect Forward is all about.
And leadership is so critical. One of the things that allowed our business to grow is number one, setting up a really strong standard operating procedure, and number two, really investing in leadership and talent and empowering folks. And so I'm a bit like I'm not a like I have nothing to sell around process or
Yeah.
standard operating procedures, but I find myself talking about that an inordinate amount of time because that's so valuable to the growth of our business.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question on that. Can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how did you know, as you've been growing your company, how did you know that you really needed those operating principles? Like where was that born from?
Oh, yeah, we had a really great 2018 and a really horrible 2018 at the same time. Like, there was one period of time. The analogy that I like to that I told my wife and my friends is that there's this scene in one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies where the 2 boats are aligned,
Yeah.
and there's a boat in the middle. And the 2 boats that are firing cannons at the boat in the middle, and the boat in the middle just gets evaporates. And that's what I felt like was happening with our business. Like, we had this really massive growth in 2018. And I was like, why are people in our company leaving our company? Like, why can't
Yeah.
I keep and retain employees? And why aren't they happy? And why are clients like giving us all this business, but then some of them are taking it back? And we had a banner year, but what I learned is after 6 months of like that weird stuff happening, I was like, okay, one of my close confidants told me like you need a process.
Yep.
Then we took another 6 months to create the process. So I understood what it was like to not have just everything lived in my brain. That was the
Yep.
fundamental problem. Everything just lived in my brain. And I was like, hey guys, you're smart, intelligent people. Like, why aren't you doing the key things that you got? I know you know how to do because I've worked with you in the past. It was because we didn't have any process. People didn't know when their job started and when someone else's job
Yep.
started as well. And it was challenging. Now we have great process, great leadership, and we're always refining that. But ugh,
Yeah.
stressful times.
I so that so resonates with me. I hear you. So good for you for putting that into place because you're right. You can't scale without it, right?
Totally. And what's really interesting is we started to scale once we had the process and once I got out of the way.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
like I can only take things so far and I actually started being a bottleneck.
Yep. COVID's been the interesting thing for me on this too, is because, starting at such a young age when the company was so small and growing it, and being my personality where I just jump in and ask questions and build deep connections with people, I could not pull myself out of it. But COVID helped so much because now, we're working from home. And so I work with my team more. And the company has done such a much better job with me not in it
Yeah,
and really letting my management team make decisions and deal with these issues that people would just naturally just, oh, I'm just going to swing by Kerry's office and go talk to her for a few
right.
minutes. I didn't realize how much I was actually in the way until I got out of the way and then saw everybody actually flourish a lot more than when I was in all of those conversations where I thought I was actually helping, but I was really holding the company back.
Yeah, from our anecdotal perspective, it's a sign of success because one of the challenges with our business is, my name is on the business, which
Right.
is great for a lot of reasons. It's great for my ego and it's great for showing people that I used to work with that I can build something. But in terms of future looking, like, no, not every client that we onboard into our business is going to work with me directly. And that's the only way the business can grow and flourish.
Yep. Yeah.
So, looking at 2022, we're entering the 3rd year, so to speak, of COVID. What are you looking at? What are your initiatives? How do you come out of COVID even stronger?
Yeah. I think COVID has been the best thing that could have happened to this company. I mean, we've made, I think, a lot of really good decisions that will set us up for the future. So, despite being in, wave 3 and coming into the 3rd year of this, and I've got a lot of employees who are sick right now who, we did so great on managing this beforehand. I
Mhm.
think we'll get through it and really we'll really keep continuing to execute some of these things that we did differently because of the pandemic. So I mentioned we're rolling out a whole new digital customer experience platform. This is going to be game changing for our industry. While lots of people have done this before, nobody's doing it in our industry, and it's going to make the buying process so much more seamless. And I'm really excited for what's going to come from that. We're investing in technology. We just introduced our first IoT enabled cleaning robot.
Ooh,
And so that's going to revolutionize the way that the industry works and I think dramatically help our customers do this work safer and more efficiently. And then I've got a couple of acquisitions on the forefront that will really help us continue to be the leaders in our industry in terms of technology advancement. And also that will help me continue to diversify. Our customer base is really reliant on petrochem and refining. And while we make that industry a lot cleaner, it's not where I want to be for the long term. So I'm really pivoting us as an organization to be more of a technology company, to move into solutions as a service rather than selling widgets, and expanding the use of cleaning with water into other applications, other industries, while really looking at how do we conserve water? How do we recapture water and recycle it so that it can be used over and over again? So lots of cool things from the technology front.
So I'm curious, does your IoT device, will it be collecting data?
Yep, absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
interesting.
it's
Like you can collect usage data or other that 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 could that make you that's really interesting from a data perspective, right? Like you
yeah.
can actually collect usage and help inform product design or help
Oh,
customers.
so much. And the really cool thing about this, so we've started with heat exchanger cleaning. There's millions of heat exchangers in the world. Most people don't know what that is, but
Yep.
a heat exchanger either, is typically cooling, doing heat transfer, cooling a product. So as you're making like gasoline, for example, it's got to go from, oil that comes out of the ground and refined through multiple processes to be gasoline that you put in your car. And
Mhm.
that process takes cooling, heating and cooling. And that's what heat exchangers are for. It's these long tubes that get filled with that material and get plugged. You have to have heat exchangers, or everything that we use is made through heat exchangers.
Mhm.
So this particular product will go in and it will tell you how many tubes were cleaned, how many were plugged, how many were partially plugged, how long it took you to clean. So the contractor can use it to be able to do a better job of bidding projects and to understand
Right.
what their crews are doing. But they can then give it to a plant who really needs to know what's going on inside of this heat exchanger because they're so reliant on it, but have no idea. And so then they can start going using the data to say, hey, if we tweak our process a little bit more through this, can we get better heat transfer for longer so that we can run our equipment and produce more material? So it's really, I know that probably I geek out on this stuff, but it's really important stuff.
Yeah.
Industrial cleaning touches everything that you use, and you don't think about it, right? We don't think about how our toilets, what happens when we flush our toilets and how we clean the sewers. We don't think about all of the pathogens that are out there. We don't think about, what it takes to make the tires on my car. But without industrial cleaning, none of it would happen. So it's such an important industry. And it's really important that we do it with less water and we do it safer because it's a dangerous industry.
I imagine so. So
Yeah.
Carrie, how can people find you and StoneAge Tools?
Sure. So I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to connect with me, Kerry Siggins. StoneAge, you can go to our website, which is www.stoneagetools.com, and learn all about what we do. Reflect Forward is on all the major podcast platforms. And if you're really curious about industrial cleaning, you can check out Industrial Theory. And then I have a personal website, kerrysiggins.com, that you can contact me through very easily.
Kerry Siggins, CEO of StoneAge Tools, host of the Reflect Forward podcast. Thanks for being with us today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the LA Business Podcast. If you like what we're doing on this podcast, please consider subscribing on Apple or Google Play, leaving a 5-star review, and sharing with your friends. If you have any questions, comments, or recommendations for a guest you'd like to hear on this podcast, please email me, robert@brillmedia.co. Thank you. Have a fantastic day.